So Title 42 seems to be in the news lately since a federal judge in Baton Rouge has decided to enjoin the federal government from suspending Title 42 expulsions. Judge Napolitano put out a video on this about 3 hours ago from right now at almost 5 o'clock. Today, April 26, 2022. He says that Trump kept people out where COVID is prevalent. So when people are coming from countries where COVID is prevalent, Trump kept them out as a group. Biden wants to let them all in if they qualify on an individual basis. And the Baton Rouge judge enjoined the federal government from suspending Title 42 expulsions. So since Title 42 is in the news, as far as the non-mainstream news goes, I figured I would do a little research and go ahead and look up Title 42. This is from Wednesday, December 12th, 1956, and this is directly from a website that the federal government has out, and I will show it to you. It's on a federal website here. This is from archives.federalregister.gov, and this comes up when you go to Federal 21 FR 9806. And why would I click here? Because when you look up Title 42, Chapter 1, Subchapter B, Part 21A under definitions. So for the Title 42, under the government website, this is the most recent part of Title 42, 21 FR 9806, December 12, 1956. View PDF here, and this is where we go. And I have downloaded it as a PDF from the website. And I went through it a little bit, and I see here, which is what I thought would occur, and that's that throughout Title 42, we see that this Public Health Act was put forth as a way of keeping the military healthy. Okay, so providing public health services to the military. As always, the federal government has expanded and expanded and expanded and expanded its authority and power to include all kinds of things that it doesn't actually have the authority and power to do. So it's just taking and taking and taking and taking jurisdiction, which is power and authority. So I'm just going to quickly go through some of these things to show you that this is intended to be for the military. Okay, because the entire Constitution is intended to legislate for the seat of government and the places purchased for forts. We can look at a list of books that George Washington had been reading prior to writing the Constitution or helping write the Constitution, and they are all military books. Okay, so there's also some information out there to show that the Constitution was actually an amendment to Article 8 of the Articles of Confederation. So it was to create a military. Okay, so, and to regulate the military. So we're going to look through here, and you can go here like I showed you and look at this again yourself, and I'll give you links to everything in the description. And you can just look through this yourself. Okay, so general provisions, just think military for a minute here. Just think, all of this was supposed to be for the military. If you've never been in the military, then I will show you how this is military. This is a voluntary act or title put forth to help aid in the public health of people in the military, for them when they retire and they want to receive veterans benefits. When they get out of the service and they are injured and they want to receive veterans benefits. While they're in the military and they need dental or health care, Title 42 is all for them, because the reason why this title has not been enacted into positive law, even though it's for the military, is because there's no provision in the Constitution to allow for the federal government to aid in the health and welfare of people in the military. The general welfare words in the preamble are not exactly what was intended, and it's not in the Constitution under Article 1, Section 8. So everywhere it talks about anything in this title, it's talking about its ability to provide health and welfare services to those people in the military. Availability of records, acceptance and administration of gifts, because they're allowed to accept gifts, which comes in the form probably of your taxes or grants or what have you. Commissioned officers. Okay, commissioned officers are military officers. You don't get a commission if you're not in the military. Only commissioned officers are in the military. Only military officers receive a commission. There are non-commissioned officers, and those are the lower rank people. These are commissioned officers. And the president is supposed to commission all his military officers. Personnel other than commissioned officers. Okay, medical care and examinations. Medical care for certain personnel, not individuals, not private citizens, not state people, not immigrants, not legal persons, nothing like that, but personnel, because it's talking about people in the military. The Coast Guard, Coast of Geodetic Survey, Public Health Services, and former Lighthouse Service, because they all receive medical benefits. Medical care for seamen and certain other personnel, narcotic addicts, so people in the military who are addicted to narcotics. Medical examination of aliens. Okay, so don't get confused. When it talks about aliens here, it's talking about people who are in the service who marry people from other countries or people who are not citizens. So they can give medical examinations to them. Okay, hospital and station. A station is a post, a military place, station management, and then it provides for Indian health. Okay, because Indians are under the treaties, right? So the military officers, commissioned officers, the military medical commissioned officers do provide some services to the Indians, because the Indians are on reservations and that's part of their treaty. Grants to states for public health services. Okay, these grants are in the form of the taxes. Okay, grants for survey, planning, and construction of hospitals and medical facilities, grants for water pollution control, grants and contracts for air pollution control. And by states, it doesn't necessarily mean the state you're thinking of. Sometimes the states, it's talking about the military posts. Grants for construction of research facilities, fellowship, internship, and training fellowships, National Institute of Health traineeships, National Institute of Health training grants for their officers and whatever physicians they might need that they can't find an officer to fill that position. Foreign quarantine, interstate quarantine, biological products or biologic products. Okay, so foreign quarantine, quarantine of foreign people coming onto the military post, because there's a lot of people who work off military post, who live in other countries, who come onto the military post to do work, such as the non-appropriated fund employees, like the ones I've mentioned before, but also spouses. So when a military man gets married, his wife is a foreigner until after they're married. Their children may still be citizens of the foreign country. So if a military person has children with a foreigner, their marriage may make her a citizen or a legal resident, but her children may not be. Maybe she has stepchildren, or she has children from another husband. Public hearings under the Water Pollution Control Act of 1948. Now, we already know that by 1940, the government had already been usurping more and more and more power. So a lot of this is still kind of oil and water. So they're already trying to move out of the Constitution and make these contracts and give grants to the states in order to provide service for it, but then it starts taking things over. Okay, public inspection of official records, clinical information, non-clinical information, so on and so forth, records. Okay, public inspection of official records, clinical information, the Surgeon General. Okay, go down now. Now remember, what it looks like today is not what it was intended to be. And even this, by 1956, I think it was, 1956, it had already expanded beyond what the Constitution allowed. So this was already expanded, the power and authority. Unconditional gifts. A gift will be deemed unconditional if it is made by the public health service for the benefit of the service, or for the carrying out of any of its functions without further specification as to its purpose or the manner of its use. So something that was intended to be voluntary is now seeming like it's more of a requirement. It's a law, and you have to do this and you have to do that, and we have to, and you have FAUCI up there telling people what they have to do, when the original intention of the Constitution was to supply services to the states as a military force, to supply a military to the states. And then this title was to supply health benefits to the military. And then, of course, it expanded and expanded and expanded. Okay, so part 21 is part of this. And if you want to read about gifts, it's 2.4, 2.5, part 2, 2.1. This is page 9806. A lot of people are interested in the quote-unquote gift for tax purposes. You can look that up. Gifts of personal property accepted under paragraph A of this section shall be placed in the custody of responsible official designated by the medical officer in charge. Okay, so subpart B, we're still under Title 42. Commissioned officers, definition, meaning of terms. Officers other than medical officers, designation of specialties, military titles. Applicable both to regular and reserve corps, so it's the active duty and then reserve. Meaning of terms, etc. It's all talking about military grades and ranks and moving up, qualifications, so on and so forth. Increased pay and allowance. And some of these may apply to civil servants working with the public health department. But mainly this was all for the military and the Indians. Okay, so subpart E, allotments generally, and then on active duty or traveling outside continental United States. Definitions, leave without pay, That's something that occurs when you're either working with the military or as a civil servant. Leave without pay. So you accumulate time over a year's period where you accumulate so many hours per days you work. So it's like you get maybe an hour for every week you work or something like that. I forget what the numbers are. But when you leave without pay, it means you don't want to use your leave you've saved up. You're just going to say, I just will leave, but I won't get paid while I'm gone. That way you can save your days that you have saved up for an actual vacation if you choose to do that. Okay, so promotion definitions, promotion of military officers, provisions applicable only to active duty, regular corps. Division of active duty into professional categories. Okay, prescription of number and grade, establishment of seniority list, seniority and grade, junior assistant grade, officers of the regular corps entitled to the same seniority and grade, restricted grades, promotion, so on and so forth. Okay, examination for promotion to the full grade and above. So in the military, you don't just move up because you're good at what you do. You have to take a test, you have to sit before a board, you have to do all kinds of stuff. Sometimes they even require you to have community service. When you're competing with other people for a position, then you have to accumulate points. And the more points you have, the more chances you have of getting promoted. So a lot of people will do community service and all kinds of stuff, get involved in different clubs and stuff, and then they get letters of recommendation or letters of thanks from different people to get more points so that they can move up in their grade. So dividing reserve corps into professional categories, temporary promotions, so on and so forth. Separation of officers on regular corps originally appointed and above the senior assistant grade. Medical Review Board, powers and duties of Medical Review Board, action of the Surgeon General. Retirement after 30 years of service. Okay, so after 30 years of being in the military, retirement of officers in the senior grade, retirement boards, appointments, referral of records to retirement boards. So when someone's going to retire, they get a medical evaluation to see if they have any disabilities. We see disability retirement here. They get their full retirement, but they may get disability pay on top of that. And the veterans' benefits come from the gifts, okay, your taxes as a gift, if that's what they're calling it. Procedures, full and fair hearings. They've made it so that we're actually indebted to all these things because they keep taking money out, and then it creates a debt, and then we got to pay the debt, and then we're obligated to pay the debt. But ancient law says that no person is seen as giving a gift for a debt. So we don't give gifts as our payment to our debt or something like that. Other necessary expenses, you have male officers, female officers, male and female officers. Okay, and it talks about insignias, wearing of uniform in time of war, wearing of uniforms in time of peace, uniform of the day. So uniform of the day means that in the winter you wear your winter uniform. In the summer you can wear your summer uniform. If you work in an office workers sometimes have a different uniform. People who work in the field, sometimes they just wear coveralls, but it's still part of their uniform. If you're going to a ball, you have your dress uniform. So there's different uniforms. It's talking about uniform of the day, and that's set by the commander, or it's set by the military from above. It starts on certain days. So when winter starts, you start wearing your winter uniform. When summer starts, you wear your summer uniform. Okay, if there's someone important coming to the military post, they change the uniforms to be something nicer. Wearing of uniforms in active, retired, and former officers. So this is all under Title 42. Public health or is it called public health? Yeah, public health. Public Health Service, Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. This is all related to the military, and it was supposed to only be related to the military and the Indians. The grants for the states just came in later. Meaning of terms, submission of application and evidence of qualifications, false statements as disqualification, physical examinations, eligibility, junior, assistant grade, so on and so forth. You come down here, increased pay and allowance, allotments, on active duty or traveling outside continental United States, leave with pay, separation of certain officers, medical review boards. That can be doctors who, or officers who want to get a license for a certain thing because the license were really for the doctors who were military, because they didn't always go and get an entire doctoral education, because sometimes the military needed doctors and they needed to license them, but they licensed them through their own licensing board. Okay, decorations, military, naval, or foreign government decorations, wound or service chevrons, other medals, ribbons, or badges. Discipline, the applicability, superior officers, officer in charge, so on and so forth, all military. Furnishings, letters of recommendation, outside employment, misconduct, so on and so forth. Board of investigation, convocation, composition, punishment, service representative, notice of charges, right to counsel, presiding officer, recorder, stenographer, all part of their courts and their investigations. Let's see, action upon finding and recommendations of board. Burial payments for commissioned officers, reimbursement, dependents of commissioned officers. This is really interesting because dependents have a federal status within the federal government, meaning spouses and their children. So quarters, like where they live, where the military lives, voluntary and joint occupancy of quarters, permission to occupy unassigned quarters. So if they wanted to room with someone else, they have to get permission to occupy someone else's quarters. Application for quarters, if you go to a military post and you're a military person and you need to have a room or a house or apartment or whatever, you have to submit an application. You make your appeals to the Surgeon General. In the Navy, they had a flight surgeon. I guess in the Army, it's a Surgeon General. A lot of these other positions that are civilian, that they don't have any power. They don't have any authority. They're just paid to just pretend to be something they're not. Okay, determination of status of dependents' parents for purpose of basic allowance for quarters. Typical military fashion. Determination of status of dependents. So are the dependents coming with the military person to the military post? Are the dependents staying somewhere else? Are the dependents going to be living on the federal lands, or does the family want to live off the federal lands? Definitions, entitlement, proof of dependency, adopted parent, step parent, parent in loco parentis, and determinations. Meaning of terms, act, department, secretary, service, surgeon general, commissioned officer. Okay, officers other than medical officers. The titles of officers other than medical officers And the junior assistant, assistant, senior assistant, full, and senior grades shall be dental surgeon, sanitary engineer, pharmacist, nurse, officer, scientist, dietitian, therapist, sanitation, veterinarian, all positions in the military. Okay, there may be some civilians, but in my experience, and I'm not saying this is accurate for everywhere all over, that civilians such as FAUCI would not be called an officer. Okay, in my experience, only officers with a commission would be called officers. And non-commissioned officers would not be called officers. They would be called, like in the Navy, it was petty officer or chief. They're the lower non-commissioned officers. They don't have a commission. Designation of specialties, military titles. An officer in uniform may use for the purpose of identification and address the military or naval title of rank responding to the grade markings worn. An officer detailed for duty with the Army, Air Force, Navy, Coast Guard, or Coast and Geodetic Survey may use in official correspondence a title of military or naval rank responding to the grade markings worn, as, for example, Richard Rowe, Major, USPHS, or Richard Rowe, Lieutenant Commander, USPHS. So he can use his, if he's in the Navy and he's an officer, he can use his Navy rank. But since all military are under Title 10 Armed Forces, he may also, if he's working with the Army, use the equivalent Army rank. That's what that's saying. Applicable both to regular and reserve corps, meaning in terms, approved school, college, postgraduate school training course, because they have ways of getting people into school so that they can meet the requirements that the military needs for those positions. Submission of application and evidence of qualifications, documentary evidence, false statements, physical examinations. Every candidate for appointment as an officer shall undergo such physical examinations as the Surgeon General may direct. So let's say you're in the military and you're an E6 or something, and you get out of the military and you go to college and you want to come back in and submit an application to become an officer. You become an officer candidate. You go to officer candidate school. You do all kinds of things. You have to be accepted. You have to meet the education requirements, so on and so forth. So I think that might be what it's talking about. Eligibility, senior assistant. So I've told you guys that the Constitution applies only on the federal lands and applies only to the federal people on the federal lands. And everything else is basically acting outside of it. And you can tell what are the constitutional titles or laws and what are not, simply by looking at whether or not a title has been made positive. And you can see that from the OLRC website. Okay, so we go down here, additional requirement, nurse officers, special requirement, eligibility. Now, a lot of times the military will hire civilians because they just can't meet their manning requirements as drawing from the military pool. So then you have civil servants in positions, so civilians, not military people, plain-clothed people, who go work for the military but are not in the military. That doesn't mean they don't take an oath, but they don't exactly sit in a constitutionally created office. So even though they have an oath, they promise to uphold and defend the Constitution, they're not in a position to make any kind of constitutional decisions. Provisions applicable only to regular corps, so active duty. And then they should have positions applicable to reserve somewhere. Yes, here it is. Positions applicable only to reserve corps. I didn't read all this before I started the video. I just did the first few pages. I already knew what it was going to say. Increased pay and allowances, duty. That's what it's called when you're working during your assigned working hours. You're on duty. If you're on call, then you're on call. Involving frequent and regular participation in aerial flight. So there's flight surgeons, they fly, or they take care of people who fly. Look, here's a red mark. Somebody did that, I didn't. Except as otherwise provided in 21.59, physical examination for reappointment. So somebody did that. I didn't do that. Somebody was, and this is uploaded on the government website. Meaning of terms, a year or leave year means that period beginning July 1. Annual leave. A work day. A non-work day. An officer in charge on which an officer has no scheduled working hours, including a day. See, it seems to me, just in my opinion, that they're trying to switch the military completely over to a civilian force. And then it goes from patriots to mercenaries. Mercenaries are for profit. We don't want that. Off work hours. Station leave means authorized absence from duty and station on non-work days, off work hours, or for a period of less than one work day. In the military, that's called liberty. You're at liberty. But not every time you're at liberty are you allowed to leave the military post. It depends on what's going on in the area. If there's some uprising or something, then they'll say that no one's allowed to leave the post. If there's a state of emergency, what have you, you may be off, but you're not off post. Sick leave means any period of 1 day or more with respect to which an officer is excused from duty because of sickness, disability, or need of medical services. They usually call this SIQ if you're just at home being sick, like if you have a bad cold or diarrhea or dehydration or something like that. Let's see, leave with pay. You're on leave, but you're still getting pay, meaning you're using your leave days that you've accumulated. Granting an annual leave, all this is for the military. Meaning of terms, a service promotion. An accelerated promotion. So my point in going over this is that in the judge's video today, he's talking about how Title 42 is has been, a judge in Baton Rouge is acting as though this Title 42 is supposed to be used to keep immigrants out of the country or to allow immigrants into the country and all sorts of other things. And what my point is that is an expansion of the jurisdiction outside. Jurisdiction mean the power and authority outside the Constitution and outside the original intent of Title 42. Okay, so the state may have contracted with the federal government to provide for services, health and welfare services, but there are a lot of issues that then come into play if there's a contract between the state and the federal government. The Constitution is a contract between the states to provide equally to each other a military force. That had to be voted on. The Constitution had to be voted on by the people of the state, and it was in Texas. Now, whether or not the vote should be considered legitimate is a whole nother story. But we have now a title being used to take more power than the federal government was actually given. And the original intent of that power appears to be to provide medical and dental services to people in the federal government as a military benefit. Because when you join the military, you get benefits. You get benefits, but you get very little pay. You get a place to live. You get medical treatment. You get some dental treatment. They don't do anything for aesthetic dental procedures, but they will, fix a cavity or what have you. So Title 42, by all appearances, is not a law. It doesn't have a positive law citation. It's never been passed into law. And it applies only to the federal people, the Indians being sort of part of the federal government because they're under treaty, right? And then the military people. And it's talking all about how to take care of these people and what rights they have, what rights the officers have, what the officers are supposed to do, meaning the military officers, the commissioned officer, what they do, and what the non-commissioned officers do, what the active duty people do, what the reserve people do, what the active people don't do, what the reserve people don't do. It doesn't really talk a lot in here about civilian positions. So people like FAUCI, who works with the CDC or the FDA, and they're constantly quoting Title 42, the public health and welfare, blah, 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 blah. Looks to be like a lot of bullshit on their part and just a taking of power. A taking, just forcing people to bend to its will and forcing people to buy masks and get vaccines and to quarantine themselves, to shut their businesses down and all these other things when they have no actual power to do any of that. Okay, so let's look at our references. I'm going to post this in the description, and you can look through this and read this if you like. And we can discuss some things in the comments if you want. If not, that's fine. Also, with that, you guys, have a nice day.